Okay, let's talk about car prices right now because we know they're still pretty high, especially with the interest rates as high as they are. And if you're in the market for a new or used vehicle, it may be out of reach.
The American car market is breaking, quietly, violently, and right under everyone's nose. Showroom lots are overflowing. Factories are cutting shifts. Families are trapped in loans they can't escape. You've been told prices are stabilizing, but that's not the full story. This isn't a dip. It's the unraveling of an entire system that millions depend on. Why are trucks that once sold in hours now sitting for over 6 months? How did car payments become higher than rent? And why are the same electric vehicles meant to save the future now killing entire companies? Stay with this video, because the deeper we go, the more you'll realize this collapse isn't coming. It's already here. Overflow lots and silent showrooms. It used to be the busiest spot in town, a humming showroom, a steady stream of sales, and truckloads of new inventory arriving just in time to meet demand. Today, that same dealership feels abandoned. Vehicles sit in long, perfect rows, unmoved for months. Even the most coveted models, Ford F-150s, Ram 1500s, Toyota Tundras, once symbols of strength and pride, are now gathering dust. In many cases, these trucks have remained unsold for over 200 days. For dealerships, that timeline is not just inconvenient, it is catastrophic. Across the United States, what were once vibrant lots are now silent graveyards of overproduction. The real estate around these showrooms has been transformed into ad hoc overflow zones. Dealerships are renting nearby parking lots, leasing airport runways, and even paving over empty fields just to store the excess. Some dealers are packing vehicles so tightly that test drives have become a logistical nightmare. Shiny new trucks, perfectly clean and untouched, now represent mounting debt and untapped liability. Customers notice too. They drive by and see the same vehicles parked in the exact same places week after week. The illusion of scarcity, once a dealer's most powerful sales tool, is broken. Buyers know these vehicles are not moving, and the sheer visibility of the surplus sends an undeniable message. Something is very wrong. The silence on these lots is not peace, it is paralysis. And just behind that stillness is a deeper crisis that is pricing working Americans out of ownership altogether, when middle-class dreams got priced out. Not long ago, owning a reliable truck was considered part of the American middle-class dream. For families, small business owners, and tradespeople, vehicles like the Toyota Tundra or the Ford Bronco represented practical strength at an attainable price. But that dream has slipped out of reach. Since the year 2019, vehicle prices have risen by over 42%. Today, a Tundra Platinum CrewMax can reach as high as $75,000. That is not luxury pricing. It is exclusion in disguise. Working Americans have not seen their incomes grow at the same pace. Wage growth has failed to keep up with the inflation baked into vehicle pricing. Even with promotions and financing incentives, most buyers cannot justify paying luxury-level prices for mainstream utility vehicles. Trucks that were once considered accessible now carry price tags rivaling those of European sedans. For families with one income or small businesses trying to manage cash flow, the math simply no longer works. The betrayal runs deeper than numbers. It is emotional. These vehicles were marketed as tools for the everyday American, built for rugged reliability and everyday use. Now they sit on lots like unattainable status symbols, taunting the very people they were once built to serve. Manufacturers may argue that technology, upgrades, and safety features justify the rise, but consumers are not buying it, literally or figuratively. This widening affordability gap is not a side effect of inflation. It is a sign of market dislocation. While consumers back away from sticker shock, a much larger problem is emerging, because the debt crisis haunting consumers is growing faster than anyone expected. What's happening to the car market isn't just about prices, it's about the very system that once made it work. If you're shocked by what you're hearing, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Negative equity, the loan that follows you. It begins the moment you try to trade in your vehicle and realize you still owe thousands more than it is worth. This is the quiet financial trap strangling millions of Americans. It is called negative equity, and it is turning the dream of upgrading into a debt spiral that is almost impossible to escape. Negative equity happens when the balance on a car loan exceeds the vehicle's current value. For years, buyers were lured in by low interest rates, extended loan terms, and inflated trade-in values. But now that the car market has crashed and prices are correcting, the value of those vehicles has plunged. while the debt remains. Today, the average American car owner is carrying over $7,000 in negative equity. That means when they go to trade in their vehicle, they are underwater, sometimes deeply. This financial quicksand traps buyers in place. If they want to purchase another vehicle, they must roll that leftover debt into the next loan, inflating their payments even more. Each cycle compounds the problem, creating loans that are larger, longer, and more dangerous. And it is not just affecting luxury buyers or those with poor credit. Middle-income families and even first-time buyers are now being pulled into this cycle of compounding debt. The worst part is that many people do not realize they are trapped until it is too late. They assume trading in their vehicle will wipe the slate clean. Instead, they are stuck with a growing financial obligation that snowballs over time. The longer this continues, the harder it becomes to afford a safe, reliable vehicle without sacrificing everything else. This is not just a personal finance issue, it is a national affordability crisis. But for those who think they can at least afford the monthly payment, the truth is about to hit even harder. Repossessions are quietly exploding. They do not come with warning signs. There is no flashing red light or countdown timer. Just a knock in the middle of the night, or worse, silence, followed by the sound of your vehicle being loaded onto a flatbed and driven away. Repossessions are exploding across America, and they are not just affecting irresponsible borrowers. This crisis is sweeping through working families, first-time buyers, and middle-class households who were simply caught in the wrong market at the wrong time. In the past year alone, auto repossessions have surged by 23% nationwide. That means more people are losing their vehicles now than at any time in recent memory. And behind each of those numbers is a personal story. A single mother who needed her SUV to get to work, a couple who stretched their budget too far, a retiree who thought their pension could cover it. These are not cautionary tales. They are real consequences of a broken system. Repossession does more than take away a car. It strips away a person's ability to earn a living, access childcare, or fulfill basic responsibilities. Without a vehicle, many Americans are functionally immobilized. And once repossession happens, it triggers a cascade of new problems: destroyed credit, difficulty finding a replacement, and even job loss. It is a cruel domino effect that often starts with just one missed payment. The tragedy is that many of these repossessions were preventable if prices had been lower, if lending standards had been more reasonable, if wages had kept pace with cost. But that is not the world we live in. For those who still cling to their vehicles, praying each month that they can stay current, there is another threat growing just beyond the loan, one that hits without warning and leaves just as much damage. Insurance premiums, the unseen cost spike. It is the hidden cost most buyers forget to calculate until it is too late. Even if a family can afford the vehicle itself, they are now being blindsided by the explosion in auto insurance premiums. In state after state, insurance rates are rising by 50 to 60% year over year. This is not due to reckless driving or surging accident claims. It is the result of higher vehicle prices, costly repairs, and rising replacement values. Insurance companies are passing these costs on to drivers, and the result is devastating. What was once a manageable monthly premium is now an unexpected second car payment. Families are being forced to pay hundreds more each year just to keep their vehicles insured. And because insurance is legally required, there is no way around it. The only options are to pay the rising bill or drop coverage entirely, risking fines, license suspensions, or worse. Some buyers are downgrading their plans to minimal coverage just to survive, but that opens them up to catastrophic risk if they are ever in an accident. The emotional weight of these costs is immense. Buyers who thought they had planned responsibly are finding that the true cost of ownership is far greater than they expected. And this is affecting even older used vehicles, those seen as the budget-friendly option. In many cases, owners are paying more to insure their used car than they were paying for a brand new model just a few years ago. The math no longer makes sense, and families are being crushed under the combined pressure of loans, insurance, fuel, and repairs. The insurance crisis is pushing more Americans to hold on to older, riskier vehicles or exit the market altogether. And that shift is not just economic. It is a warning sign that even when the sale is complete, the affordability crisis is far from over. Because in 2025, car ownership is not about convenience. It is about survival. Nissan's 9,000 job cuts, a warning. It began quietly, just a single announcement buried in a corporate earnings call. But when Nissan confirmed it was cutting 9,000 jobs globally, the message to the rest of the auto industry was impossible to ignore. What had been unfolding in the background, sluggish sales, unsold inventory, and bloated production pipelines, was now reaching a breaking point. For one of the world's largest automakers to pull back so drastically signaled a collapse far deeper than a seasonal slump or consumer hesitation. It meant the manufacturing backbone of the industry was starting to buckle under pressure. Nissan had spent years flooding the market with models, chasing growth and banking on forecasts that predicted ever-increasing demand. But that demand never materialized. Consumers were either priced out or unwilling to commit to vehicles with five-figure loan obligations. As a result, plants that were once humming with activity now stood half-idle. Factories in Japan, the United States, and Europe began scaling back shifts or suspending production altogether. The layoffs were only the first visible crack. Behind those cuts lay a more painful truth. Nissan was not alone. General Motors quietly began trimming its production schedules across multiple plants in Michigan and Ohio. Toyota, long considered a model of stability, announced reductions in output across several regions. These were not isolated moves. They reflected a broader shift in strategy, from aggressive expansion to controlled contraction. Executives were no longer planning to dominate new markets. They were planning to survive the next 12 months. This wave of layoffs was only the beginning. Just as manufacturers were pulling back, a far more dangerous mistake was beginning to surface, one that had been quietly building for years: overproduction, the mistake that broke the system. For nearly a decade, automakers operated under a dangerous illusion that consumer demand would always rise to meet supply. In the aftermath of the pandemic and the global chip shortage, manufacturers ramped up production aggressively, assuming that pent-up demand would flood the market. Instead, they found themselves drowning in vehicles no one wanted or could afford. Overproduction was the result of both optimism and fear. Automakers feared missing out on market share, so they built aggressively. They feared losing revenue, so they kept pushing inventory to dealerships even as sales began to slow. In doing so, they created the perfect storm. By the start of the year 2025, dealer lots across the country were overflowing. It was no longer just a local issue, it was a systemic failure. Cars that once sold within weeks were now lingering on lots for months. Trucks that used to command long waiting lists were now collecting dust in backlots, fields, and overflow yards. This was not just about misjudging the market, it was about refusing to adjust. Manufacturers kept the conveyor belts moving long after buyers had stopped showing up. Internally, many automakers tried to spin the narrative. Some claimed it was a temporary imbalance. Others blamed interest rates or insurance premiums. But the reality was far simpler. They had made more vehicles than the market could bear, and they had done so at price points the average American could no longer afford. Dealers begged for relief, but the inventory kept coming. Some even refused new shipments, unable to move what they already had. What came next was inevitable. When vehicles could no longer be sold at a profit, manufacturers began leaning into discounts and rebates. But even slashed prices couldn't reverse the damage. Overproduction had triggered an existential crisis, one that electric vehicles were supposed to solve, but only ended up deepening. The EV trap: too expensive, too soon. Automakers thought they were building the future. In boardrooms across Detroit, Tokyo, and Stuttgart, executives bet billions on electric vehicles. They promised cleaner transportation, technological innovation, and the dawn of a new era. But what they delivered, at least in the short term, was a luxury product that most buyers couldn't touch. The EV transition was meant to save the industry. Instead, it exposed how far automakers had strayed from their customers. Take the Ford F-150 Lightning, hailed as a revolution in electric trucking, with a base model approaching $55,000 and top trims climbing past $95,000. It priced out nearly every working-class American family. Then came the Hummer EV, a hulking statement piece with a six-figure sticker price and more flash than function. Even with federal rebates and promotional offers, most consumers simply could not justify the cost. The gamble was that buyers would pay for cutting-edge tech. But with inflation, high interest rates, and rising insurance premiums, most Americans were looking to cut costs, not increase them. And the EV ecosystem was nowhere near ready to support mass adoption. Charging infrastructure remained inconsistent and underdeveloped, particularly outside urban centers. Cold weather, long-range anxiety, and high maintenance costs deterred the very buyers automakers hoped to attract. Worse still, traditional gas-powered vehicles remained cheaper to buy, easier to maintain, and more familiar. That made EVs a hard sell, even for climate-conscious consumers. So now, billions of dollars in research and development were tied up in unsold inventory and stagnant sales reports. Factories built to produce electric fleets were scaling back before they had even hit full stride. Automakers thought EVs would bail them out of a declining market. Instead, they ended up with expensive models, low adoption, and an increasingly skeptical customer base. And as the EV dream wavered, the one fallback dealers used to rely on vanished almost overnight. Wholesale market crash, no exit left. For decades, dealerships had one safety valve. If they couldn't sell a car on the lot, they could offload it at auction. The wholesale market acted as a buffer, absorbing excess inventory and softening the financial blow of unsold vehicles. But in the first quarter of 2025, that buffer collapsed. Wholesale prices dropped by 18% in just 3 months. That drop wasn't just steep, it was catastrophic. Dealers who once used wholesale auctions to stay liquid suddenly found themselves losing money with every unit. Vehicles they had financed at retail cost were now worth thousands less on the open market. Some cars were selling for below cost, meaning every auctioned unit translated into a net loss. And with financing costs continuing to rise, the losses became too heavy to bear. Worse, auctions that once offered consistent demand became flooded with inventory. Too many vehicles, not enough buyers. The result was a complete reversal. Instead of auctions being a relief, they became another weight around the neck of struggling dealerships. Vehicles that didn't move on the lot now didn't move at auction either. Or if they did, they sold at prices so low it destabilized local pricing expectations for everything else. The implications rippled across the industry. Floor plan lenders began tightening their terms. Smaller dealerships began downsizing or shutting down entirely. The safety net had not only been pulled, it had unraveled. For many dealers, there was no longer an escape route, only a slow slide toward insolvency. And while the manufacturers that created the oversupply scrambled to reorient their strategies, the ground beneath the dealerships, the front line of the auto economy, had already collapsed. What once offered stability and fallback now offered only loss. The damage didn't stop there, because when the dealers fall, the workers fall. And when the workers fall, entire communities follow. Workers cut, families wrecked. The car market crash isn't just about inventory numbers and balance sheets. It's about people. In cities across America, factory workers, mechanics, parts suppliers, and logistics crews are being shown the door, not because they failed, but because the system around them collapsed. Entire families that once depended on steady paychecks from automotive jobs now face a terrifying new reality: unemployment without a clear path forward. The latest wave of layoffs has struck hard, with major manufacturers like Nissan cutting over 9,000 positions globally, and other brands quietly following suit. These cuts are not just happening at headquarters or in far-off production plants. They are reaching deep into local communities, hitting working-class neighborhoods with precision and pain. In towns where auto manufacturing was the heart of the local economy, the effects are devastating. One pink slip doesn't just end a paycheck. It pulls the rug out from under families who have built their lives around stable employment. Medical bills pile up, grocery lists shrink, weekend routines vanish. Fathers and mothers now spend their days looking for new work in industries that either don't exist in their region or pay far less. The damage doesn't stop at the home either. Schools supported by local tax revenue are suddenly underfunded. Local businesses lose their most loyal customers. Social services see a spike in demand just as funding becomes uncertain. This isn't the kind of layoff where people bounce back in a few weeks. For many, especially older workers who have spent decades in the auto industry, retraining or relocation isn't realistic. They're not just losing jobs, they're losing identities. And just as these workers are struggling to find footing again, the communities they belong to are slipping further into decline. The fallout doesn't end with individuals, because when one factory shuts down, it's the whole town that begins to unravel. Cities that can't drive forward. In the Midwest and beyond, the auto industry has long acted as the economic engine of entire cities. Places like Flint, Toledo and Janesville once pulsed with life thanks to the steady rhythm of shift changes and production lines. But now those same towns are quiet. As car sales plummet and factories scale back or close entirely, the ripple effects stretch far beyond factory gates. Cities that once thrived on auto manufacturing are being forced into survival mode. The tax revenue, once generated by thriving factories and high-volume dealerships, has dried up, leaving public institutions like schools, fire departments, and hospitals with smaller budgets and bigger problems. Small businesses that once served local workers, diners, hardware stores, daycare centers, are closing their doors. Real estate markets in these areas are stagnating or falling. Properties sit empty. Streets feel emptier. Young people are moving away, leaving behind aging populations with fewer resources and even fewer opportunities. The loss of industrial purpose turns civic pride into quiet desperation. This isn't just a regional crisis. These are American towns that once symbolized strength, resilience, and productivity. Now they symbolize something else. What happens when an entire industry turns its back on the places that built it? For decades, automakers relied on these communities for their labor, loyalty, and legacy. But as demand falters and profitability becomes the only priority, the companies are leaving and taking the future with them. While entire cities try to survive the collapse, the crisis is seeping into something deeper: how Americans see themselves behind the wheel, the identity crisis on four wheels. There was a time when owning a car meant something more than transportation. It meant independence, progress, even pride. Your first car was a milestone. A new truck symbolized success. An upgrade meant you were moving forward. But that cultural identity is now collapsing. As vehicles become less affordable and more burdensome, many Americans are stuck with aging, unreliable cars they can't afford to replace, or loans they can't afford to keep paying. The car, once a symbol of personal freedom, has become a source of stress and stagnation. Across the country, buyers who once looked forward to trading in for something newer now dread the conversation. Negative equity, rising interest rates, and unaffordable monthly payments have locked people into financial arrangements that feel more like traps than opportunities. Even those who want to move on from old, inefficient models often can't. They're stuck with vehicles that are expensive to maintain, bad on fuel, and often unreliable. Stuck with loans that carry interest rates of 7% or more. Stuck with insurance premiums that keep rising year after year. The emotional toll of this is immense. People are starting to question their own financial worth, their futures, even their self-image. What used to be a rite of passage is now a reminder of limitation. For a generation of drivers, the dream of mobility has been replaced by anxiety. And for the next generation, the idea of car ownership may not be a dream at all, but a burden they are eager to avoid. As this identity fracture deepens, it threatens more than just culture. It stalls the one hope that might have saved the future of driving, the green revolution that stalled in the lot. Electric vehicles were supposed to be the next chapter, the clean alternative, the technological leap, the promise of environmental responsibility. But for millions of consumers, that revolution has hit a financial wall. As traditional car prices skyrocketed, so did electric vehicle prices. High trim levels, battery costs, and new manufacturing platforms pushed the average EV far beyond the reach of most working Americans. Even with aggressive federal and state incentives, the math just doesn't work for families already struggling with insurance premiums, loan burdens, and inflation. The result? Progress has stalled. Instead of transitioning to electric, many drivers are holding on to older gasoline-powered vehicles that emit more carbon and require more repairs. The used market is saturated with aging sedans and trucks, while shiny new EVs sit unsold on dealer lots, their sticker prices daring buyers to make the leap. For those who want to help the environment, the price of entry is simply too high. And for those who don't see the benefit, the choice is even easier. Stick with what they know and what they can barely afford. This slowdown doesn't just hurt automakers. It threatens long-term climate goals. Every year that the average driver delays switching to an electric vehicle, emissions stay higher. Every year that EV sales fail to penetrate the mass market, the infrastructure to support them remains underbuilt. The charging stations don't arrive. The demand for clean energy lags. The circular failure begins. No buyers, no infrastructure. No infrastructure, no buyers. What was once billed as the solution is now the luxury. And in a market already stretched thin, luxury doesn't sell. Affordability is the barrier. And unless it's broken, the revolution remains parked. As the car market continues to crumble, it's more than just financial fallout. It's a fundamental shift in how Americans view ownership. What does this mean for you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analysis.